Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world right now. My name is Tyler Olsson. I am the creative director here at REIMAGINE, also sometimes your host, and you're tuned in to another REIMAGINE 2021 virtual event. And this one is version 8, where we're talking all about NFTs. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, we at REIMAGINE are a team of people who believe that blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies in general are an important part of our future, not just because of the ways that they are innovating the financial sector, but also because of the ways that that financial innovation crosses paths with innovation of the internet itself and all the myriad ways that we integrate it into our lives, right? Socially, privately, communicatively, creatively, etc. And because we care that you all come along for that ride into the future, we strive to keep the conversation alive and keep you informed, both at the high level and in detail. Now, as I mentioned, this time we're talking about NFTs and how artists are once again leading the way and disrupting the system and bringing much needed public attention to this space. Now, joining me today to talk about music, art, the revolution of NFTs and blockchain tech is a very special guest who I'm super excited to chat with, the one and only Don Diablo, the man who's been referred to as, quote, the future house's founding father. Now, not only is Don the top guy in the world of electronic dance music, but he sort of ventures into a bunch of different avenues. He's hacked the world of fashion, right? If you're not that familiar with his music, then it's very likely you've seen some of his logo, his brand, Hexagon. He has, I think, I remember hearing that you started out in filmmaking, you came up independently, and now he's made his way into the world of NFTs, recently selling the first full-length concert NFT, his Destination Hexagonia, which sold for 600 ETH, which is at the time the equivalent of 1.2 million US dollars, making it the number 5 most valuable digital art piece in the world. Don Diablo, thanks for joining me today, man. How are you? Where are you in the world right now?
Thank you for having me. I am in Amsterdam right now, where I've been for, the greater part of the last year, actually, thanks to the pandemic.
Yeah. What's the time? What's the time over there? Because I know it's bright and early for, well, not bright and early, but it's bright. What is it for you over there?
For me, it's 11:30, so it's like mid-office hours right now.
Right on. Well, yeah. Well, I sort
of 11:30 p.m. Just to
yeah. Got it. It looks kind of sort of ominous and dark back there, man. I love it. And yeah, thanks for taking the time despite the time difference. Now, as I had mentioned, I sort of want to get into in just a bit talking a little bit about your sort of ventures into the NFT space and kind of some of your thoughts there on why you think it's important, and kind of you can give our listeners a chance to hear a little bit about the details of your particular project, because I think it's really interesting, and I have some sort of questions about what you might want to do in the future. But maybe before we get there, could you share a little bit of your background? Like, how did you get started, and sort of maybe you can frame it in such a way that it helps us understand how sort of you ended up crossing paths in the world of tech and got where you are.
Very good question here. Well, actually, I started out when I was, I guess, about 13. I bought my first camera, and I was really intrigued by actually like filming things, and then sort of buying some editing gear. Then I bought at the time a blue screen, which would now be known as a green screen, obviously. I got my chroma key set up, and I had basically, when I was 13, I was making small commercials for local companies and basically filming events. And at one of these events, I heard somebody play electronic music, kind of was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So I found out you could actually, because I always wanted to be in a band, but I grew up in a very small village with not really any friends. So I couldn't be in a band, but I found out you could make music with computers. So I was like, okay, this is very interesting. So I got a computer and I started working 3 different jobs, from washing dishes to and working in a sauna to all kinds of crazy stuff, until I had enough money, accumulated lots of studio gear. Then I started throwing events. With those events, started making more money. And I think, yeah, when I was 14, I had my first company, kind of sold it, and then I went full time for music. To where one of my friends sent one of my records to a record label. That's kind of how it started, because I was like, I'm making film, but I started making music for some of the videos that I was filming, and they actually wanted to release the record, so I was kind of shocked. They put it out, did well, and then I ended up getting signed when I was 14 to a record label, mostly what we would call now ghost producing for other people. So writing records for other artists anonymously. I put out some of my own work, and from there on, I basically sort of dove into the world of music. But I've always like been, working like on all kinds of different creative sort of adventures. I've always been involved with the creation of the art for my releases, but also directing, producing my music videos, um, making clothes, as you said. And I guess from there, it just kind of became, um, a little bit of everything. But I guess I was most known for making music. I had a big sort of rise when I was like between 16 and 20, and then I had a giant dip for a few years, and kind of everybody just kind of gave up on me. That was the end of it. And yeah, I kind of refused to give up, so I moved to London. Again, I was signed at that time by Columbia Records, um, and I kind of had to start all over again, writing, producing, mostly producing for other artists again, but this time more for pop artists. And then at some point, I just kind of, I was really stuck with myself. Then my mom called me, told me my dad was seriously ill. So I flew back home. Turned out that my dad only had a few more months to live. And I had this real conversation with him where I was like, I had this realization moment where I thought like, okay, this is the moment where I need to do it. Because I kind of grew up with everything like super avant-garde. I was named after Captain Beefheart, was, always hanging out with Frank Zappa. Everything was like super weird, super avant-garde. And commercial was like kind of a dirty word, right? So anything that would be successful would be kind of a failure. And, that's kind of how I grew up, right? So from that point, I had that conversation with my dad. Turned out I actually completely misinterpreted that whole thing. And then I just kind of made him a promise. I said in the next 6, 7 years, I'm going to work 19 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm going to absolutely give it my all. And I kind of came up with a whole new sound that we now, together with a couple of other guys, created this movement, which is now called Future House, or Future in general, futuristic sounding music. And I guess, at some point, I think a few years in, nothing really happened. And then people like Ed Sheeran, Rihanna, Madonna, Coldplay, all these crazy artists started asking me for remixes. And that's kind of how I expanded my sound into different areas of music, and more people got known to it. And that's kind of when I started climbing from, the bottom to like entering number 82 in the DJ Top 100, climbing to where I'm at today. I'm my third year in the top 10 of the global DJ sort of list. And not that lists really say anything, but it really was something for me that I grew up with, watching my heroes at the time, like Fatboy Slim and Underworlds and all of these super cool artists. And but yeah, to be honest, I wasn't really sure like if that was my end goal, if that was it. And then then the digital revolution came, and now we're here.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's sort of interesting to hear how kind of, like, right, sort of we all aspire those sort of creative types, right? You sort of like aspire to maybe be in a band one day, or sort of, to sort of get in to kind of like the industry in a very particular way, right? Like we had this vision, but sort of sort of, you talked about, growing up in a small village, right? Maybe that like wasn't an option, and sort of it was a different landscape, back then, 15, 20 years ago, right? But like you said, that it was the computer that really sort of catalyzed you into kind of the exploration that sort of led you to where you are today. Do you feel like you sort of owe a lot to like the computer and sort of what synthesizers and kind of like the computer interface did for people who had, I guess, like an urge to express themselves musically? And
Yeah,
like, do you
yeah,
think that that was really important for getting you to this sort of avant-garde kind of sound?
100%. Like I always struggled with my health when I was a kid. There was a sort of a possibility I wouldn't even make it beyond my teens because of very bad heart and bad lungs.
Oh,
So I always kind of had that dream of like living in the future and seeing what the world would become if I wouldn't be there.
yeah,
And I started really kind of diving into these sci-fi films, Space Odyssey 2001. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. That was the only thing that I connected on with my brothers and my father because, men, they don't really talk amongst each other unless it's about Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi or Darth Vader, right? So for me, that became like a whole world in itself, and all the tech and all the futuristic elements to it started, really sort of becoming a part of my life. And then when I found out that you could actually have like a best friend in a computer, right? I really sort of became an obsession to make the most out of the possibilities that you have with a computer, right? It literally allows you to be a one-man band, and it allows you to do everything that you have in your head for the first time. At that time, I still worked with an Atari. I had to really have like master. There were no YouTube tutorials. You really just kind
yeah,
of just messing about, and I think that's why all the early electronic music was so adventurous. Because nowadays everything is made a lot easier, right? You have sample packs, you have plugins that already have super fat sounds in it, and a lot of examples of how people make music. So I think a lot of people are like kind of overwhelmed by all of the opportunity and all of the inputs. But back then it was just like I was just a guy in a small village pressing buttons, nobody to speak to. I was just like, cool. And even when I made a record, I put it out, they pressed it on vinyl, and I was like, you have no idea. Later on, sometimes years later, I found out that, oh, this is a big record in the UK. I had no idea. They had no idea who I was. And I
right,
had no idea that people all over the world were, they were dancing to my music. Um, and that really, that actually was a blessing and a curse in a way, because you were kind of dependent on radio, to be seen as successful. But at the same time, it was a blessing, um, because there wasn't the internet, so there wasn't that pressure of like seeing what other people are doing. You didn't have to like upload social media continuously. You just
right,
did it, and you put it out, and then you wait. There was nobody else to react to it. There was like no there's just that creativity from between you and your computer, night in, night out, no sleep, just experiment. And
right, right.
I do actually love that period looking back on it. And the funny thing is, that's basically what happened here with this pandemic, right? We went back. I personally went back into that same state of mind of like when I was a kid. I literally sometimes sat in my house just this last year. I didn't see people for 2, 3 days, didn't speak to anyone. No one's heard my music. No one has an opinion on it. I don't have to play it out live. I'm not playing it to a record label. I'm not sharing it with any fans. I'm not, it's not intended to be in a club or on the radio, right? So
Mhm.
you go back to a place where you're at your most creative and without any pressure. And this, I forgot about that, that this is how the world could be as well. And I've really embraced this period as something really positive to kind of have like a full reset. Plus, I started working on some really crazy different projects that I was able to do because I wasn't touring anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's really interesting to see how our sort of how the creative impulse really changes when you can unplug and kind of step away from sort of what in a certain context are like your influences, right? Like, how you had mentioned at a certain point in time, kids sort of grew up with all of this exposure to all these other artists with YouTube and sort of the accessibility of music through, streaming and whatnot. But at a certain point, those can start to act as, constraints on you because, right,
Yeah.
if you don't take the time to kind of really sit with yourself and kind of um, sort of be willing to experiment a bit, right? It's kind of like if you get on like a modular synthesizer, right? You don't have the constraints
Oh,
of these
absolutely. Also,
pre-programmed
like
sounds.
when you had something, you just you're gonna maximize the use of that to the fullest. Like nowadays, you can just buy something and plug in a couple of $100 or not even, right?
Right.
Usually people even crack it, like you just use illegal software and just try it out. You maybe not even buying the license in the end. And that's kind of how the world became, right? It's the same with music. It's become a little bit more throwaway, or any type of digital art became very throwaway, right? People are
Right.
just posting really. Take someone like Beeple, he's posting something amazing every single day, but because it's there at the tip of your hand, the tip of your fingers, right? It's on Instagram. You're just looking at it and then you move along. But it's an actual piece of art. And I think for music, that was kind of the same story. Like it's so easy for people to just browse through Spotify, click through a bunch of stuff. Whereas back in the days, you really had to buy an album. The album had
Right.
super dope, artwork, and it was an experience. Once you bought it, you spent so much money on it. You're going to listen to it a lot of times, and you treasure that. That buy that you just did. It's like
Right.
a piece of you. And I think, um, yeah, that's the one thing that was kind of missing here, because everything became so super accessible. Whether it's like making art, everyone is a photographer, right? With a dope iPhone and a cool filter.
Right.
Uh, Everyone is making music with whatever DAW they found somewhere online, music software, to make music, maybe with some pre-programmed loops, etc., etc.
Yeah.
The same goes for anything like digital art, like anything you can imagine. It became sort of more accessible for people to create. Even back in the day, if you want to take a picture, you have to have to photo lab. You have to develop film. Like who
Right.
actually knows how that works? When I started out making music, it was super complicated to actually. You work with MIDI, and you have to send all these signals, you know, via your computer through all of these machines, and these machines would communicate with each other, and then they would all end up in one giant mixer, and then the mixer would be, hooked up to a DAT recorder, and then you would record to that, and that would be that one take at that moment in time, and you're like, cool, is this it? Well, maybe tomorrow I'd change it up a little bit. But once you had it, there wasn't any total recall on your mixer, meaning you can only work on one song at the time.
Yeah.
So you sometimes spend like 3-4 months on a record, just with complete concentration, because you knew you would never be able to go back to that record and change it, which is now obviously completely changed. Even now, sometimes you're still swapping audio on Spotify, right, like a day before the release. So
Yeah.
everything's become completely, in flux. And I think for me, actually, I made the most of this because I've never been an artist that's been on the radio so much as some of my peers, right? I never got that support from sort of the traditional media. But
Mhm.
so for me, it's been a curse and a blessing. But I always like to look forward and look at it from a very positive approach.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and like, speaking of like looking forward, right? It sort of like, I feel like, right, because you're kind of talking about the sense in which, like the accessibility of not just music from, or sort of any kind of art from the point of view of the consumer, right? But also sort of like the accessibility of creation from the point of view of like the producers, right? The people who are actually creating these things, like the hyper accessibility in a lot of ways sort of waters down the process, right? And it becomes really throwaway, right? But also it kind of affects the way in which we sort of appreciate music, because in like electronic music is a really good example. I take it that people are that are very disconnected from the process of actually producing electronic music, right? They're sort of blind to some aspect of the music that ought to really be appreciated, because they just assume that everything's created off of sort of pre-programmed sample packages or something like that. It's just kind of plug and play, right? And so it's like
Exactly.
the designer sort of falls out of the picture in a lot of ways, and so it actually affects the experience that the consumer has with the music as well.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I saw the cover for Beeple for Time magazine that they just put out, and it shows like a work in progress, the back end of creating a digital art piece, and there you
Yeah.
can actually see like, wow, instead of showing the actual art piece, it's like showing like the beginning stages of it. You actually realize, wow, this is incredibly complicated, And this is, like, this isn't like, it doesn't just magically appear. I think that's what a lot of people, were or are thinking. But
Right.
this goes not just doesn't just go for electronic music or music with computers. To be honest, like, most music at this point that we're listening to is electronic music, because most of it is made with computers nowadays. So it's
Right.
just sort of a sound design choice, that kind of differentiates it. But there isn't really much difference, because the same here. You're playing your instruments. I write lyrics. You write a song, and then then you produce it, you engineer it, you mix it, and there you have a song. It's exactly the same process as any band. The only thing is you have to do it by yourself. Sometimes maybe with one or two extra people, but you don't have a full band where everybody plays the instrument, plus a singer, plus an engineer, plus a producer. You don't have all of that. Kind of just, you have to have all of these different hats on. And in my case, it went a little further, right? It's not just about making a record; it's about creating a world around this record. And I think, for me, that's kind of where Hexagon started, right? For me, it was like, I always had these imaginary friends in my head. I always had sort of an imaginary parallel universe in my head that I would be living in when I was a kid. Because when you don't have any friends, you become very creative, right? So you come
Yeah.
up with all of these creatures. Like, even my radio show, it's co-hosted by an imaginary robot boy called Hex, right? But
Yeah.
obviously, it's me, right? But the idea of having a co-host, that I can speak to, and he was always there for me. That's kind of, how these things started to develop. And uh, yeah, that started coming back in the music videos. And I think that universe started building itself when I started the Hexagon platform. Fans started calling themselves Hexagonians. They were all like, when are we going to Hexagonia? Then the comic book came, and the whole story started developing, and I started to kind of like expand into sort of more writing and creating universe. And then that started developing into more physical art pieces. And from there on, it just, everything started to get blurry. But then it's like, who really are you, right? Like, because, yeah, you do a little bit of everything. It's like almost like a jack of all trades or a master of none. So
Yeah.
now I think it's different, because we're going back to sort of like a another, like an art renaissance, right? Or digital renaissance, if you will,
Yeah.
where you're allowed, actually you have to be uh, sort of, multi um, multifaceted type of artist. Where if you look at the Renaissance, if you look at someone like, let's say, Michelangelo, right? He was a great sculptor, but also a painter. He had many different forms of art that he practiced on the highest level. And that's why I love this space, because it allows you to create art objects that are, that consist of as audio, as well as visual, as well as
Mhm.
maybe even something tech, and something, all of that together would then become an art piece in itself. And all of a sudden, for the first time, we've always regarded people like, Van Gogh, Rembrandt. These are the Dutch masters, right, from my country. Or any
Yeah.
people, from the art, from the history of art that we know, we respect and love, that we are in awe of. It feels like we were never able to, to get close to that. You had modern art. You had people like Jeff Koons. These were the people that were like, the exceptions to the rule, right?
Mhm.
And I think now it's becoming more accepted that if you work on something very meticulously, you put your whole heart into it. It's a craft. Like, it literally, like, you have, like, almost like this is your paintbrush. Only the paintbrush is, it's digital, right? Like,
Right.
much
The
as every
mouse and keyboard strokes or something. Yeah.
keyboard strokes, or even like for my Genesis piece, I created a hologram cabinet that came with a cartridge. On that cartridge was a physical art piece. It was a hologram of the very first keyboard that I bought as a kid. It was sort of a memory that popped up as a hologram. And then you have a song that played with it, and that whole piece together was then sold to somebody who collects fine art. Like, my work all of a sudden wasn't on Spotify. It was on a fine art platform, super rare. And I
Yeah.
was amongst people that 99% of these people, actually 100% of these people, create visual art. And then there I was, right? So I was very
Mhm.
grateful that they were like, they were very accepting. They were like, what you do, we perceive to be art, so we want to welcome you into our, into our home. And that really gave me sort of a switch in my mind, like, wow, like, am I now actually sort of, valued in a different way? And, I feel like most of your life you go through these phases where you feel trash, right? Like you're never as good as the other guys out there. There's
Yeah.
always, like, there's a whole world of people that are better, more credible, more renowned, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter if you climb to the utter top of what you do. There's always someone bigger, better, bolder, more respected. And especially for what we do, like, this craft has been, I don't know, it's like, it's almost like it's never really been valued in that way. No one really ever actually asked me about, why did you shoot this music video? What's the meaning behind, or what's the
Mhm.
meaning behind this lyric, or behind this piece of art? Like, they're always like, cool, tell me about the life. I'm like, much like any other artist out there, I'm just putting my emotions and feelings into a piece of art, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's the one thing that really blew my mind from what's happening right now, that I'm able to have all of these different disciplines, put it into one piece, and then sell it to someone who's actually never heard of me. You've never really listened to my music. He never goes out, but he just looks at the work that I do in itself. It's like a full reset, and goes like, this is super amazing. I want to buy it, and I'll do whatever it takes. And honestly, it goes back to a point where you're like, the thing is, I remember when I started, right? I had this, I made a mixtape. I actually
Yeah.
found the mixtape the other day. So that mixtape, I went to the local record store. I was like, I have this tape. I spent 3 months working on this tape. Do you think you could sell it? And they all kind of, kind of just gniffling. I don't even know if that's an English word, but just like, you
Yeah.
know, laughing inside of
Yeah.
themselves, smirking. And then they said, cool, okay, little boy, we'll put it on the wall. So every day I walked into that store and I asked them, like, did it sell? Is it gone? Obviously, it was still there. Until one day, I think 4 months in, I walked in, and they were like, they had cake, and there was like, I was like, whoa, 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 whose birthday is it? They did, no, 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 you actually sold the tape. And my mind exploded, right? The fact that I connected to one human being, and one human being was finding pleasure in whatever I created, that to
Yeah.
me was the most magical feeling. I had butterflies in my stomach. Then you grow up, right? You grow up and you go like, okay, I have no fans. I have 12 people on my Facebook. You get older, you work hard, you never sleep again. And you come to a point where you have 2 million people on your Instagram, 3 million on your Facebook. It's never enough. There's people pushing you. There's agents, managers, labels, fans, haters, the world, all of these influences. And then you're like, you have these discussions with your record label, like, oh shit, you only have 50 million streams on the last single. What are we going to do? How are we going to save this? And then I'm like, wait, stop, rewind. Only 50 million. There's another 50 million on YouTube. So that's still, with all of the platforms accumulated, that would still be 150 million people who heard my music for that one song that was never on the radio. That's pretty
Right.
huge. I have 10 million monthly listeners on Spotify without, aiming for commercial success on the radio. So that just brought me back to like how this society is like, you can never have enough likes, you can never have enough follows, you can never have enough plays, you can never have enough streams, you can never have enough anything, because this is the thing, once you start climbing that ladder, it's like a monster just keeps eating away. And that's the one thing I realized, like a lot of the guys that I talk to, like fellow musicians or artists, this is why we have all of these crazy anxiety attacks. This is why we have a record amount of suicides even during the pandemic, because
Mhm.
there's this imaginary monster living inside of us that just kind of screaming at us the whole time, it's never enough, this is not good enough. And
Yeah.
this, what happened right here, and a lot of my fans have sort of like sometimes a little bit of, I guess, difficulty understanding like how amazing this is for me, because you could be playing in front of 50,000 people and still feel incredibly lonely, because it's so hard to make a connection, right? You sometimes feel so distant from the world.
Right.
And now here you are, one person in the world says, I'm going to value this piece, and we're going to have, this is like almost like going on a journey with someone. So what I did for my first piece, if someone that person paid, I think that piece was sold for 110 ETH, right? So that's a substantial
Like
amount
in
of money.
this is your Genesis piece. This is your
Yeah,
first NFT. That's what you're referring to.
exactly. So that to me, that blew my mind. So I sent him the piece, and then via the post, obviously, and
Mhm.
he got the piece, sent me the videos. Like it was completely broken, in shambles. What happened? They opened it up at customs, and it was they didn't understand the electronics behind it. They tried to put it back, and then they gave it back to him. So he's basically got a piece of junk, which he just paid a substantial, amount of ETH for. So
Wow.
I felt his pain. I was like, everything happens for a reason. He said that to me as well. This was a very wise gentleman. And I actually, I was like, cool, that's it. I'm buying a ticket. I'm flying your way. So this is what I did. I went there with my, the shopping bag with the art piece in it. And, he picked me up from the airport. From there on, we had these amazing conversations. He took me into his world. He told me his life story. And it really kind of changed my perspective on everything. And again, I kind of went back to that little boy that went into that store and had the idea of like somebody out there like truly appreciates me, right? And I think now, because of this one connection, I can understand again what those millions of connections actually mean and what the value is of working really hard and getting a shred of success and gratitude from people for what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, and it's too sort of easy for people that are on the executive side of things like, labels or sort of the managers of artists, to sort of look at the artist as just serving a business function, right? But as you were trying to sort of tease out of what you're saying is that, I mean, like we have to remember, right? Not to lose sight of the fact that sort of the arts are like something that we like, for lack of better way of putting it, we have a spiritual connection with, right? It sort of improves our lives in ways that sort of can't be sort of measured in terms of sheer quantity, right? It's like you have all
Well,
this
you're
pressure.
correct. Exactly. I think the thing is that the main people always ask me like, "Hey, I want to become a successful artist. What do I do?" I said, "Well, there's no way to become a successful artist. The only reason why I started making music and started creating art, I've always been making art, but I just never sold it. Right? This is the first time I'm actually selling my pieces because I feel confident about it. But I never made art to get rich of it, to be successful, or to even to make it a job. I think I was already a professional musician for like almost 15 years. And
Mm.
then someone said to me like you're not, understand, this is no longer a hobby. And then I started realizing like, wow, I'm actually, there's all of this opportunity. Maybe I should start taking this seriously. But most people, what they do is they see it as a task. I have to be a successful musician, poet,
Yeah.
writer, um, painter,
Yeah,
digital art,
seek fame
whatever.
and riches, right? Yeah.
Exactly, but I've always had jobs on the side to make money. I never wanted to have that pressure of having to make money with my art or with what I create because that would just create too much pressure for me. And then I think that's kind of in the end what created my success, that I was able to keep that sort of thought process and that sort of initial excitement and enthusiasm, for everything I do, just like when I was that young boy. And I think, some people would say like it's a slightly artistic sort of approach to everything what I do, because I do, yes, I work 19 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I'm very like on every little intricate detail of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But this is, everybody always tells me you work so hard, you're gonna work yourself to death. But like, if I can zone myself out from the pressure and what people expect from me, then
Yeah.
I feel like I don't really even have to work. But sometimes it's when all of those, influences from outside come in, it's when it gets really heavy. Like even now, I have like fans that are like very confused, right? They're like, "Well, the album isn't done, and he's doing NFTs now. What's happening? Has he forgotten about us? Like, the album is 1 year late." And I'm like, three steps back, because this really hurts me, right? This actually makes
Yeah.
me. This actually was today. So I have all these crazy meme pages and fan pages, and they write all these things about me. Usually they're very, heartwarming, but now they feel like they don't understand the NFT space. So they're like, "Oh, that's it. We've lost Don to a couple of wealthy collectors out
Yeah.
there, and we're not. He's forgetting about us." But the whole thing is, everybody's talking, in my case, they're talking about my album. But you don't realize is that I've been putting out a record every month. You're already getting the album. It's already
Yeah.
there. I've never made more music in my life. I've never worked any harder in my life. And I'm like, what generation are you guys from? Because basically what you do is you put out a record every month, every 6 weeks, and then, maybe after 10 records, you have an album, you add like 4 or 5 really dope new records, you bundle it, there it is, the album. But I find it a struggle to explain, like, you're in the middle of this process. It's almost like you're waiting to have sex, and like you're already naked. There's you should be experiencing the feel good feelings of, like the whatever it is that you do right before the orgasm. It's not
Yeah.
about the orgasm. That's just the end of it all. So I say the album is the end. You really, like, if you can't enjoy the journey, you will never enjoy the destination. But this is the whole thing. Working up to an album is like, it's like life, right? It's the whole
Yeah.
climb that I want my fans to be on board with me. And obviously, I'm very lucky. I have the best fandom in the world. So these, 99% of them are very supportive. They don't understand it. They're
Yeah.
like, but they're like, cool, if this makes Don happy. But you have to understand that this doesn't just make me happy, it makes me feel whole for the first time in my
Right.
life, right? And it makes me make better music. And also it makes me I'm actually able to financially invest in things that I've lost a lot of money on in the past, to be very honest. Also, what people forget is that I have 20 people on my payroll. It's a company, right? And
Yeah.
I wanted to keep paying everyone during this pandemic. And a lot, this is like, if you work in the entertainment industry, you had an incredible beating financially, to kind of keep your head above the water. And I
Right.
think this is what people are forgetting. So I got an incredible amount of messages from people, like, I think they thought I invented the wheel overnight. I'm like, guys, like, even creating this film took a year. Creating the
Yeah.
first piece took a year. The new piece that I'm working on right now, it also took almost a year. And by the time it comes out, actually, it will be a year in the making. These are
Wow.
incredibly big risks that I'm taking. And it's not like, some people come to me now, obviously opportunistically, saying, cool, I like this, you did a DJ set and you sold it for a good amount of money, right? Let's do this. How did you do it? Can you explain it to us? And
Mhm.
now all of a sudden I'm talking to like massive athletes, like top 5 of the world, massive pop stars. They're all kind of leaning into me, like, how do you do it? I'm like, well, the thing is, that's not really what I did. What I did was I created an art piece that I worked on for a year. Then I put it in a box. That box contains a flash drive. On that flash drive is a mystery. The mystery is what I sold, right?
Yeah.
Basically, only one person in the world gets to see it. And sometimes you have to do that. And then you get, like, maybe people saying, like, oh, why is this elite piece of art? No one's going to see it. Well, I'm like, 3 steps back. I already gave
Yeah.
you 12 free live streams during the pandemic for free. You had to pay nothing for it, right? And I think that's what people forget. They expect everything to be free and they lose the value of what art is and the amount of time and effort people put into it. But when they look at they all go to museums, they all look in awe at paintings or at sculptures, and then they don't even actually realize that all around them there are people creating art that has actual value. They just have to make the last switch in their head, in their appreciation towards these things. And I think that is exactly what is happening right now. And that's what makes all of us and my generation and all my peers that I talk to in the NFT space, our heads are blown. We don't sleep anymore. This is like
Yeah.
24/7. We are on because this is a digital renaissance. It's a revolution. And for the first time, we feel like anything is possible. And there's like this like unbridled enthusiasm that I haven't experienced in many, many years.
Yeah. So, do you feel that maybe the kind of shift into the space of NFTs and kind of minting things on a blockchain and just kind of the novelty of that space, do you feel like that's what's been most important for you, kind of shifting back into this like exploratory mode? Is it the fact that it's new and it's really open and kind of it's like removed from that sort of context of pressure from like labels and fans, right? Like losing sight of the fact that you're a human being. Like, is it the kind of like freedom of the novelty of the space that you feel like is really doing all the work for you?
Oh, I think you summed that up perfectly. Yeah, I think that's what it. I mean, this isn't. Don't get me wrong. It isn't new, right? Because we had the crypto kitties, the crypto punks. It's been
Sure,
around
sure.
for a couple of years, right? And I've been following it. I've even like almost launched my own coin a couple of years ago. I ended up
Hmm.
not doing it because people sometimes feel like it's about money, and when I get that. I think when you're an artist, it should never be about money. So in the
Right.
end, I backed out because I was like, cool, I don't want to be in a position where I could potentially put like someone at risk, or even like maybe my fans would buy coins and then something would happen. I'm not 100% responsible for this because it's just not really my forte, my specialty. So
Sure.
now I've been waiting. I've been observing the space, and then that's why I was able to make these quick moves, right? Where everyone was like, how this is impossible to do. But
Yeah.
I think, as actually as you say it, it's not really even as much about the actual NFT as the mind state of people that's changing, right? That's the real
Exactly.
revolution. I think
Yeah.
everybody's staring at like, oh, blockchain, Ethereum. Oh, is Ethereum, is it like a Bitcoin, or what is it? Like they don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and that's cool because the thing is, I didn't get it in the start. At the start, it's very logical to just ask questions. No question is dumb because everybody has to learn this. Like if you're jumping into the space now, into the NFT space, let's be honest, you're still a pioneer. This is still very much in development, and I think that's kind of for me that mind state is what really is coming out of this. The mind state of digital assets actually having value. And also the other thing is like you can get all these crazy collaborations, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
talking uh, to people I would never be able to collaborate with if I was the Don Diablo, the electronic musician, right? I'm even talking to some of the biggest pop stars in the world, the biggest creatives in the world, the biggest athletes, also like the biggest film franchises, right? I'm doing an NFT collaboration with Star Wars and Lucasfilm, Disney,
Oh
which is
wow.
insane if you think about it, right? But at the same time, I'm talking to museums and basically galleries, auction houses that auction like Van Goghs, right? Like the auction Rembrandt. So because they've seen, okay, Don has done this. He's a new artist in the space, and he's sold two pieces at X amount. So that actually now makes me the highest averaging artist in the scene all of a sudden, which everyone was like, "What's happening?" And
Right.
I'm like, "What's happening?"
As if by accident, right?
As if by accident. But I think that's what it is. I think sometimes whoever is above there sees your hard work. They see that you like the greater part of your life you've lived in the shadow. You've dedicated your whole life to creating something you had no idea what the destiny of it was. Then all of a sudden a door opens and you're like, holy shit, this is it. And then when
Right.
people actually value that, that is like honestly, I felt like the last few weeks, I for the long first time in a long time, I felt like real shreds, sorry, of 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 happiness. For a long time, I've been searching for this, and uh, it doesn't really have anything to do with success, but more like finding a purpose. Like, why are we here? What am I doing, and how can I bring everything that I have in this insanity that's called life together into one giant ball of creativeness. And I think I've always been creating things that I never shared with my fans or the world because I didn't know how. I had no
Yeah.
idea. I have this, what do I do with it? And here you go, now there it is. And I think it gives you a lot of it releases a lot of pressure, and it gives you sort of a lot of comfort also. Like it allows me to, like, I did 200 shows a year, right? Like it's pretty nuts. I had my gums were bleeding every single day because I sometimes slept like maybe 6 7 hours in a week, and it just go on and on and on and on and on and on, never stop.
Yeah.
5 6 countries in one week, and then come home, make a radio show, run the record label, do the clothing line, make some designs, make music, do a remix, give a kiss to your mom, go back into the plane. Uh,
Mhm.
it honestly is a life that, like, it's like it was a big toll. It is a big toll, and I
Yeah.
think it's not really healthy. And this is why I think even with Tim, with Avicii, what happened to him is like I feel like we need to take an example of what happened there, because this actually does take a big toll on you. And I think, when it comes to bands or most artists, what they do is they make an album, they work really hard on this album, right? And then they tour with that album for a few months, a year, whatever, 2 years. Then they take a break, right? That's what all pop stars do. That's at least most of them, right?
Yeah.
And that's what all bands do. Anyone in music, you have to take a pause. But that doesn't happen in where I come from. It's just a continuous, every single day, every holiday. You never have a day off. You can, but for
Mhm.
some weird reason, you don't take a day off, and I don't know why, but you just kind of get consumed by this feeling of like, I need to keep going. Because the thing is, you were in Barcelona last night, the next day you get a message, why are you never in Barcelona? You're like, oh my god, you missed it. Then while you're reading that, you're flicking through, you're like, all this mass information comes at you. You're never in Estonia, you're never in Israel, you're never in Portland. Portland, oh my god, I was in Chicago. It doesn't, no, it's like, oh, why are you never in Atlanta? So it becomes like a map, it becomes like a minority report, right, in your head, where you're like, I'm a massive failure, I'm disappointing all these people around the world, I need to keep going until I die. And that's kind of, and then the pandemic hits and you're like, holy shit,
Right.
what have I been doing, right? So
Right.
I
Like
think,
in a weird way, you have this sort of fortune of like, getting to take sort of that breather that you think you should have been taking all along. But what's funny is you had mentioned before that sort of with your brand Hexagon, right? It's not just about music, and it's not just about sort of art in any kind of narrow sense, but it's about world creating, right? You're trying to create an entire world. And I mean, you said it yourself, right? If you're trying to create a world, it's almost like you end up having to live in the image of a martyr, right? So you, as the artist, as the world creator, right, you sort of end up having to, in a lot of ways, sacrifice yourself to sort of keep that world kind of coming into
absolutely,
fruition, right?
yeah, you feel a responsibility, to be honest. Like, and the thing is, like, with my fans, we're like, if you know my life story, you know that I've always been an underdog, right? I never had a support. I never had anyone backing me in the industry. I have to figure all of this out all by myself, right?
Yeah.
And I think my fans, they know this. They know, like, you can make the impossible happen if you just, maybe I'm not even like that super talented, but I am probably one of the hardest workers on the planet.
Yeah.
And I think, that's kind of, if you look at my school picture, like my yearbook picture, right, you can see this kid who's like 30 kilos, like 60 pounds heavier than I am right now. He has like a big ponytail, like super pale, never came out of the house. And I think, my fans, they know that, like, you can reinvent yourself, you can become the best version of yourself. And I love that, because I had to do all of this by myself. And a lot of my fans, they don't have any friends, so they come to my concerts alone sometimes, and then they'll meet people there, because it feels like there's this feeling of like, I can go there, I'll meet people that, we're like a family.
Yeah.
And I think that with having a family, it creates great responsibility, right? You feel like you're, a family member that needs to take care of all of the family members. And I think it's a beautiful thing, but at the same time, it is a responsibility. But I think that is the greatest good of what I've done, and this is how I write my records, and how they have a lot of sort of emotion in them. They deal with my life, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
my, anxiety, or whether it's losing my father, or whether it's not being able to have a relationship because, of the way you're actually living your life. I'm telling
Yeah.
all these stories to them, and I get stories back from them, and it's like a constant dialogue. But it's also like, it's it sucks energy out of you, and you have to keep giving, keep giving, keep giving. And I think this is why the NFT space is great, because it's giving me a lot of like renewed, reloaded energy into sort of my, it's plugged in another energy, sort of a nitro boost, where I'm like, okay, once the world opens up again, trust me, this is going to be Don Diablo 2.0. So I would want fans to be like super excited for me and for them and for whatever else is going to happen next. about what I'm doing right now. And I get it. When you're on the outside, you don't understand how important this period is. You don't understand that I'm talking to creatives every single day. I buy 2 or 3 little pieces, right? Maybe for 1,500, 1,000, 700, 800, $2,000, whatever.
Yeah.
These are actually those are big amounts of money for an art piece, for a digital art piece, right? They only have to sell 3 or 4, or sometimes even 2 of these pieces to sustain their life with their art, which is that is where the revolution lies. Not even in what I do, because what I do is completely different, maybe. But obviously, I'm going to do a community give back as well. I'm going to do a whole pack where I give back. But the thing is, if you want to give back, you first have to be of value, right? And I've never valued myself. When I went into the NFT space, it was like, cool, I can't go in there thinking like I'm some kind of superstar DJ and anything I do will be valuable. I felt like I had to start over again. This is a whole new discipline. I have to prove myself that I'm valuable, then I can actually give back something. And I think a lot of people, you see with a lot of these, even a lot of my peers, right? They saw people succeed. They were like, cool, I need to put out all of these packs, right? Like visual packs with music attached to it, open editions, raffles, one of ones, 100 of 100s, all of these crazy, packages. And started making hundreds of thousands of euros, pounds or dollars, ethers, ETH. And, I think then what happened is people were like, oh, wait a minute, what did I just buy? And then on the secondary market, the prices started plunging. And now they have a problem. They're all like trying to burn pieces, give pieces back. Here's a new piece. If you burn the other piece. So it's become a little bit of a mess. And I think that's why I entered with such great caution and I put so much thought into it. And that's kind of actually, and this again is kind of, I guess, my life story, because I was rejected by the big platforms at first, where all of my peers were, who actually on paper would have had lesser success when it comes to statistics, but for some weird reason I couldn't get in there. So I ended up at this super cool quirky website, Super Rare, who do like more fine art artists, right? So I ended up having to switch my thinking pattern, and that actually ended up, you know again, like, I guess when you have a bit of when things don't really go the way you want, there's always a reason for it. And that's the one thing I realized, even when the gentleman said to me, when the piece was broken, like, hey, it's broken, but everything happens for a reason. And I do actually believe that's how my life came to where it is today, because I went over there, and all the stuff that happened over there is actually going to be a massive influence on everything I'm going to do after this. So I think that's where there was a lot of, like, there was a lot of opportunity. There is a lot of opportunity. So when you have a lot of opportunity, there are a lot of opportunists, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where it becomes dangerous, even for those guys hitting me up like, what do I do? I want to make money off NFTs. I'm like, it's not a life hack. It's still like, it has to have actual value. It has to be super cool, super inventive, super innovative, super creative. It's not like you
Right.
can just sell. It's not like you can trick people into
Like you
buying.
just write your name down on a post-it, take a picture, and then you drag and drop, and then all of a sudden it's going for 100 ETH or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's like people think like, well, I will get a cool visual artist, and then I'll add some music to it, and then that'll be like like a digital asset. We'll sell that on the blockchain as an
Yeah.
NFT. Let's rake in the money. And I think that it's not that's not really how it works, in my opinion. I see a lot of people making a lot of money with that, and obviously
Yeah.
I could be making a lot of money with that, and
Right.
it should cost me a lot less effort. But I feel like to me, this is a serious movement. It's not a trick that you can just
Right.
exploit and go like, cool, I'll do this, I'll make the money, and I'll get the hell out of here. Even if because the second I just bombed the secondary markets, and I
Right.
basically just tricked my buyers, my collectors. And I feel like, for me, I hope where this is going toward. If I see all the innovation that's coming, right? Like, so many people are starting new platforms. There's so many crazy big players entering the space. This is just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's gonna get
Right.
crazy, trust me. And even like for people, I want the people to know that are buying my pieces. I almost want to start a dialogue with them up front. Like, approach me. Like, what do you have? What can we talk about? Rather than doing these crazy auctions. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what I'm creating, and I want to make sure it falls in the right hands, right? So it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be this crazy rat race. And I feel you can have these dialogues with people and create these things that belong in museums eventually.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And like, you're completely right that, I mean, I would totally agree with you that it's not, that there still has to be some sort of like genuine passion behind it, and maybe in some cases it'll sort of work out for a buyer to turn around and sell something on the secondary market because it's just like many other bubbles, like it's very new and people see that there's a lot of money flying around. So, people are going to be grabbing things as fast as they can because there's a lot of uncertainty, so like they're going to take their chances. But I definitely agree with you that it shouldn't be thought of as premised on sort of a kind of trickery or just another
No,
scammy kind of market, right?
I think also what you said, a buy, you call it a buyer, but I call them collectors, right? I collect as
Sure.
well because I feel like I don't want anybody to sell something that I created. I want them to own it, to be proud. Like when I buy an art piece, I'm very excited when I get it. I'm not, the first thought that I have is not like, "Ooh, I need to resell this quickly so I can make some money on it." I want to create pieces that people are genuinely excited about. And some of these pieces, like the next one, is so complicated. So that needs to be a dialogue. Like some of these people,
Interactive, yeah.
yeah, it's not even this. This isn't even transportable. It's that big, right? Like you can't put it in your house or your backyard. This is like a whole. It's like a completely different approach to the whole situation. So you can't even explain that in a little text blurb on a digital auction house, right? So
Right.
I have this task to like even like try to explain to collectors like, hey, what I'm doing here, this is gonna be, we want to do something that's gonna, in my case, my whole disruptive, right? That's, I want to disrupt, and I want to, whenever people have the idea like, cool, we're gonna make these super cool video loops with music, and well, I didn't even actually make it, but I get someone else to make it, and then I'm gonna sell it for a lot of money. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm giving you a movie. This is not a 12-second loop. It's a 1 hour film.
Right.
you know? So I think people have to like think bigger, right? They think, and I think also here, what I love about this is that the people that were in the background, the creators, who were kind of like used for their creativity in the past, are now at the forefront. These people, um, who were always sitting in these dusty rooms creating digital assets, making commercials, working for people that like literally, that they hated their jobs, they hated their lives, and they've now, dude, you have no idea. If you look at like the people you talk to that like are like reborn, they're like, well, I never have to work for a boss again, or like I never have to work for people who give me these assignments that are like drenching my soul as a creative. And now all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they don't, you never have to become rich of it, but you have to like be able to sustain yourself and to feel appreciated. That's a worthy way of living, and that's, everybody deserves that. And I think that is why this space is so important, and that's why this is a revolution. Because like just now, right before the interview, I bought a piece, and then you get a message back, thank you so much, I'm now able to buy new equipment and make better art.
Yeah.
And I love that you're actually in a dialogue with someone. You bought a piece, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, you're making the world a better place, right? Especially now when the
Right.
creative industry is hit so hard due to the pandemic. And yeah, I think this is great. Like every time something happens, right, like a plague or something like crazy, there is a renaissance, right? There is this period where all these new things start to bloom, and either you're with it or you're not. And there will be thought leaders, and there will be people following, and there will be people sort of trying to push things forward. And I think that moment is now.
Yeah, it's kind of like uh, the way I've been thinking about it lately is, if cryptocurrencies in general are kind of like a big, fuck you to like an
Yeah,
older financial system, right? It's like the NFT craze is like the ultimate fuck you to the concept of the starving artist, right? It's like another redistribution of wealth strategy where it's now
absolutely.
like possible and very accessible for people to be rewarded, right, by all these other
Absolutely.
people who have sort of accumulated new wealth, right, new money, right? They can come and they can reward people for their sort of like genuine, authentic artistic expressions, right? And
Yeah,
then like
absolutely.
you
And
put it, that guy can go buy new gear, right?
it's the creator behind the creation that usually wouldn't get any credits now, that now becomes like, look at someone like Beeple, right? Like he's sort of he's the unwanted messiahs of like, you know, this whole space, and he's not looking for attention. He doesn't want to be a superstar. He just became one, you know, and he's the most humble, sweetest guy ever. And I think everyone in the space is, to be honest. There isn't really any space for ego, and those who have it actually, they don't really do that well, to be very honest. And what I love is that these guys, if you look at, if you go on like Foundation or Super Rare or you know, any of these platforms, Rarible or OpenSea, right, for anyone out there, you know, just starting out. So you look at these pieces, they're incredible. Like you look at like, you start looking at the world in a different way. You start seeing everything, you start valuing everything much more, whether it's a piece of clothes or a conversation with a person, because you can sell a poem, right? Even that's something that's valuable. Normally you would just read it or someone would read it to you, but now owning a poem, that's something that's so valuable. Owning a picture, owning, you know, this is becomes a part of your collection, you know. And I think you look at these small pieces of video, whether it's 1 second, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and you look at it closely and you see that's real art. Like all of these, you know, people around the world are creating beautiful art, and it's like in these digital galleries, and you have to just reset your mind to the same point where, you know, when I was 19, I started a company called Phase 4, and the concept was I wanted to stream music on the internet. And everyone was like, why? You know, like, why? I want to own it. I want to have a CD. Why would I ever want that to be something that's not tangible, right? And later on, obviously, you know, I got a grant from the government out here, and I went and I got all these licenses from all the major labels, started the website. At some point, like people didn't get it. They were like, why would we pay for streaming, like for something that I don't own? I don't get, like something that I can't hold. They didn't understand it. And I think it goes back to the days of like the 1920s, right? When you had like people went to a theater and they saw like all these people on stage doing all these crazy stuff and singing and dancing. There was an orchestra. Someone said like, this is all cool. I'm just going to record this with a camera and then put it on a flat screen. And we're all just going to watch and sit on these chairs and look at a flat screen. Everyone's like, that's never going to work. Why would, that's boring. And then someone was like, no, well, we're going to put a monkey in a tower and we're going to call it King Kong. And it's going to be more spectacular than what happens usually on that stage with these people that are just in one living room and one decor. And I think that's happening now. People are getting more creative, and people are changing their mind state to where like, okay, wait, that's right. We went to the theater, but then we accepted the cinema. We used to buy records, but then now we're all just streaming music from our phone, right? So why not this now? This is like such a very logical, you know, thing that's happening, even though you always have these discussions with people like, oh, yeah, wait, so why would I pay for this? Because like I can just watch, I can view it on the internet, you know. Like again, they always give the standard example of like, well, you can look at the Mona Lisa, but you don't own it, you know. That's exactly the same principle, right? That's sort of become the standard way of like defending it. But I think it's better defended the way I just kind of explained it, to where you don't actually have to physically own. I also, even like if you look at collectibles, right? Most people, they have collectibles, they have like a really dope like shoe collection, right? They have them in these boxes. They never actually even touch them. They just put them in a closet. They're collected and it's there. But now you talk with these shoe collectors, they're actually collecting digital shoes, because they're like, you know what, easier to trade. You don't have to ship it. It never gets damaged. You can see exactly like, you know, where the value lies, and it takes no storage space in my house, because it's stuck. I don't have a house that's that big. So I think, you know, it's why not? That's like, it's completely logical, right? But you just have to make that last switch in your head, and you know, do the dive and go look into it. Just go to like NFT Bible, look it up and read up, and go to some of these auction sites. Just browse a little bit, see if something tickles your fancy. Go on OpenSea. There's a lot there, and just, you know, kind of experiment a little bit with it.
Yeah, and sort of, you know, there's like a bigger picture view, which you were, you know, kind of bringing out, where it's not in every case about, you know, having, you know, provable ownership over, like the first Pepe meme ever created, but it's also about, investing in both monetarily and sort of intellectually, investing in uh, like a space which is sort of containing so much potential for what our world is going to be like in the years to come, right? Like, it's about sort of investing time and energy and money into restructuring the internet itself, right? About the ways in which we sort of stream music or sort of share digital assets with each other, right? The ways in which our social media platforms work, right? All of that stuff is like the undercurrent here, and sort of NFTs are, as you put it earlier, right? It's just one tip of one of the icebergs. It's in
No,
a
100%. Absolutely, you're putting it like that's on the money, because the thing is, as well, like in this space, there are like some really incredibly inspirational people. They come from all different walks of life. They have these life stories, and they think in a decentralized way, right?
right,
And uh, and they're thinking like, cool, we're gonna invest in NFTs, we're gonna invest in artists, because that means us investing in the future. If you buy a piece from me, I pledge to disrupt. I pledge to disrupt the status quo, and I pledge to push things forward. And that's what my collectors know. They're not just buying a piece to someone who wants to make money, but they know I'll be putting it back into creating something new, into pushing things forward, to decentralization, or to disrupt, or to kind of
right,
push things forward. And I think they're great minds. They don't think like in a straight line where like, well, I need to drive in a big car, or like I need to have
yeah,
all these things that are just going to disappear one day. They want to really make the world a better place, give people more opportunity, and also reward people that work extremely hard and that are, they've never been valued maybe in the way that they should have been valued, because they recognize that, because they were like, these are people like some of those some of the biggest collectors. They have had like a long story of people not believing in them, or like, and then they were like, cool, I'm just gonna buy. They just bought like 10,000 bitcoins back in the days, you know like when they were like, when people still bought a pizza with a bitcoin just for fun.
uh-huh, yeah,
Well, you can kind of do the math how much that would be worth now. They were not actually even able to spend that in their whole lifetime, but what they're doing is, really literally, helping the decentralization of the world, and thus giving more opportunity to people, in different from different backgrounds. And a lot of it
right,
is about inclusion. A lot of it already, that discussion is coming there, right? Like
right.
to support people from all walks of life, races, sexes. Like that's already there. That discussion, and it's moving really fast actually.
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting to see that all of these sort of like diverse set of values can kind of come into this sort of intersectional space here, but it's like the Wild West, right? It's a completely different political mindset. Like you have people over here that are very into, it's like, oh, it's this old school model of like voting for the right people and writing the right legislations and etc. But it's saying like, well, how about this sort of like Wild West grassroots movement of like writing like technological legislation, right? It's like we're sort of investing in decentralized protocols here and saying like it's not so much this way that we do it anymore, right? It's coming over here and like genuinely letting people duke it out, if you will, in a truly decentralized way. And it's like all of a sudden more people are more free than they ever could have imagined through this old school kind of, quasi political mindset of like
Hundred
letting
percent.
other people do it for them, right?
And that's what I love about the NFT space, because to be honest, like I'm I come from a creative background, so I don't really do finance, or like like the sort of political background of it all.
Yeah.
I'm playing my part with the creative part, and as said, like for me to buy one or two pieces a day, and then seeing people tweet about it, like how it's changing their life, how they're like, there's even me bidding on something and then starting an auction, and then someone else, it shows up on the front page, someone else sees it, like, oh, Don Diablo bid on this, well, it must be worth something then, I'm going to bid on it as well. and it even goes beyond my collection. It's just creating sort of a ripple, and that's what I love about it. That's just a small example of how you can change people's lives on a daily. And I guess if you're on the outside, you will never be able to see that. The only thing you see is like, oh, there's a guy, he's trying to make a lot of money with, you know, NFTs. Just, the stuff just comes flying out of the air. Sometimes even creating these pieces, you're taking a huge risk, you know, like, because again, we don't know, this is uncharted territory. So again, it's really about doing things that are innovative and disruptive, and then you never know where it's going to go. But you need, you know, I'm excited to see more people entering the space, and I know a lot of even like my peers, they see their peers as competition, right? Like for me, even the other day, I was the top bid on a piece of one of my colleagues, right? Because he was like, I could feel like he was extremely nervous, but very grateful at the same time for the way it all ended up. And we were talking about in this, we never actually met each other. You know, we didn't really know each other. We knew of each other, but me buying his piece made him very emotional because, like, you know, this is the first time where we're not competition. That's not how I see it. We need to build this together. And I never wanted to be in competition with anyone, but that's sometimes how it goes, right? When you're like, you're in a list and there's a billing on a festival and someone needs to play later with more fireworks and craziness, and somebody needs to get paid more, and so you need to be in this rat race. Here we are, like, we're just going back to, we're like, no, man, I want to root for you. I want you to succeed. Obviously, to be honest, not everyone's like that. Even I've already experienced the gatekeepers, right? People that are already trying to stop you from succeeding. But, you know, I think, you know, what happened to me is a good example of, like, take big risks, be bold. And you know, like, I go into the casino, I take all my money that I just took out of the you know, the my account, and I just red. Okay, let's do it. Let's do this. It's been nerve-wracking, honestly. Like, I've been inside my house for 3 weeks, just staring at a wall, just like behind my computer, 19 hours a day, crafting away, just understanding, deciphering, learning, paying respect to other people, and just understanding and the value of what we're doing here. And I feel that is what needed, and it's needed. And you see people who do this amount of dedication and sort of investigation, those are usually the people that are, you know, doing best in the space.
Now, I have some questions about sort of what you have on the horizon here, but I want to pause this for a minute, kind of circle back and sort of give you a chance to, in more detail, explain your Genesis NFT and then your most recent one that sold, Destination Hexagonia, in sort of on the coattail of the theme that you had mentioned earlier of, you know, when you came into this space, you sort of really had to kind of start over, right? You kind of like fell back down to the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. I think it's very symbolic that your first piece sort of, the contents of your first piece sort of were what they were because, right, it was a way of circling back to something that you had started way back in the day, right, when you were literally, right, on your whole journey at the sort of bottom of the barrel at the start. So maybe tell us a little bit about your Genesis piece and then your most recent one, Destination Hexagonia.
No, that's actually a really good intro. Like, my Genesis piece, first of all, it's a song. It's a song that I started working on actually, like, when I was still a teenager. And it's funny because it felt like something I would never be able to finish, because the thing is, everything is compartmentalized, right, in the world. Meaning, if it doesn't fit on the radio, it doesn't fit in a club or on a festival. When it comes to music, it has to be very streamable. If it's none of these three, then why even put it out? That's kind of the sort of the way of thinking for a lot of years, you know, like now. And so I've made a lot of music where I'm like, well, I put so much time, effort, dedication, love, you know, and inspiration into it, but what it doesn't have a place in this world. So this is a record that I worked on for maybe, you know, 15 years, 19 years, maybe even, like, on and off. And it's just sitting there. And it's funny, even during my relationship with my ex-girlfriend, she was like, she heard about this when I sold my Genesis piece, and she heard the song. She's like, she got emotional. It's like, we were together for almost 10 years, and the only thing I heard from that room, when you were never there at birthdays, you were never there, during holidays, you were just working on this song and all of these songs. This was one of them, and it just triggered sort of a Pavlov's dog for her, like, right, brought her back to the period, and she became emotional, saying like, "Wow, now this has found a place," and she knew how much that meant for me. So what I wanted to do was take that essence of something I'd worked on for a bigger part of my life with um, combine it with something physical, because I want somebody to have something that they can look at, that's tangible. So I created first of all a hologram animation, a digital animation, 3D animation of the first keyboard that I bought as a kid. Um, then I was like, cool, that's cool. So you have a video, it's a loop with a piece of music, uh, but it needed something else. So I created a thing I like to call a hexagram. It's a hologram cabinet, and it comes with a cartridge, and that cartridge has the art piece on it. So the only thing you have to do, take the cartridge, pop it in right there, and the art piece pops up as a hologram, which is kind of like, I guess, a dedication to my love for Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is not something you put in 2 or 3 lines, right? So I had to make a video about it, kind of explain, and I think also this is the blessing of Clubhouse. This app just kind of popped up out of nowhere,
Mhm.
and I've been in these rooms for like maybe months on end in these NFT rooms, and I never spoke a word because I don't really like taking the mic when others are speaking. I don't want to. It feels a little bit awkward, right? So months in, someone says like, "Wait, is that like Don Diablo? Don Diablo?" And they put me on stage, and they were like, "So what if we've been seeing you in this room, in all of these rooms, all of these NFT rooms for months? So what are you doing here?" So then I told them I was like very nervous. My voice is like literally like breaking up. And I told them that I was, about to make my first move, and I was really, I, I really, this really meant a lot to me. And that's kind of how the whole thing started. And then I did this clubhouse, and uh, everything started rolling. Like everybody started talking about it, and then I remember even midway in, my mom was like, halfway the auction, like, "Oh my god, you have like an offer in for like 60 euro. That's insane." It's like, "Oh, well, mom, like 60 E, it means like ETH. So it's Ethereum."
Times 2000, ma.
And she's like in shock, right? But it was that I think everybody was able to follow that, and they knew how much this meant to me personally. So that's kind of when the Genesis thing happened. I was like, holy shit! I come in on 110 ETH. That's like right now. That's like it's over $200,000, right? So I was like, holy shit! What do I do next? So the good thing is, like, I didn't really have to think about it much because I was already working on most of these pieces. Again, it comes from the point where you need to create, not to think about the purpose or any finances behind it, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I basically had this idea, like I've been doing a lot of these live streams, I've been doing a lot of concerts in my life, but what about creating one thing that would be like the ultimate show as I would see it, like in a sort of a sci-fi film setting. I'd be like, you know, levitating. There'd be like objects flying around. I'll be playing around with gravity. There'd be like emergency system disruption, like the asteroid rains, all this crazy stuff happening while I'm performing. And so that turned into like a 1 hour concert film sci-fi extravaganza. um, and then I was like, cool, I'm just going to put that in a box, put that on a flash drive, I'm going to sell this to one person. And that was Destination Hexagonia. And now, what happened after that, like when that sold, like the whole internet kind of like started exploding, went front page news anywhere from all any news information aggregation point in the world kind of started writing about it. And that's when everything started exploding, and that's when everything started coming my way. And the funny thing was, this all happened without a team, like no one, just me. Even me personally, just minting it, just really behind my computer, like very sort of nonchalant. And it was like all of these guys like have giant teams, they have like all this big preparation, and then here's a guy just created the top five, biggest sort of you know digital art piece in the world all of a sudden. And that's really when the story starts. And now I'm in the middle of this crazy. It's like a movie, honestly. It's like a. I'm gonna write a book about it. Trust me. This has been. It's been a mixture of like I don't even like the Wolf of Wall Street meets Forrest Gump meets, what, like honestly,
Like Star Wars meets Tron meets The
oh yeah,
Matrix
yeah.
meets.
It's been nuts. The people I've been speaking to that I would never thought I would be speaking to, the things that have been happening, the opportunities that I said no to. Like honestly, I could have made millions and millions and millions already in the last couple of weeks. But I feel, I have to be true to myself, and I have to make sure that whoever collects a piece from me, it will keep its value, and I vowed to take the space seriously. So for the third piece, it's gonna be my biggest one. I don't even know what I'm gonna do after that. It's a
Yeah.
very, very big risk. It's a very big physical piece. That's gonna be something that I'll. It's partially also something you can go inside of, and it's an experience, and but both digitally as well as physically.
Mhm.
Um, and it's something that I'll be curating maybe even till the end of time. So it's a lot of things fluxing around where I want to, start a relationship with collectors. Where even with the Genesis piece, right? Like
Mhm.
you have the cartridges, but I can also, if you want, I can log into your Wi-Fi and we can have a continuous dialogue for the rest of our life. Where I have this control room in my house where I can just tap into your hexagram. I can send you messages. I can give you new pieces of artwork. I can do all of these crazy. This to me is art 2.0, right? Where you don't know
Yeah.
what you're going to buy. You're buying a mystery. That's what makes it so exciting. So everything I've done so far is literally that. You're buying something that has initial value, but then it has a mystery attached to it. And I think, that to me is what I always loved as a kid. It's like that story behind it, like, oh my god, what's happening? Like I don't know what's happening, like help, like, and it
Yeah.
changes. But it's not going to stay the same. It changes. And um that's my aim. And now the next thing I'm doing as well is I'm doing this collaboration with Star Wars. I'm actually like able to bring them into the metaverse for the first time officially, thanks to the kind folks at Disney. So
Mhm.
I've created a this, what, as we said in the beginning, one of the other things I do is design clothing. So I wanted to design a jacket based on my favorite episodes that I grew up on as a kid. Again, I think all these pieces, they have an emotional value. They come from a personal perspective, and I think that's what art needs to be. You need to read a little story behind it, and that needs to grab you, and then that gives it value, right? So, and this is like Star Wars is like, for me, that's like Endgame. And so I wanted to create a jacket, something you can wear. It has all the, the classic episodes on it, and it's attached to a token. I'm just gonna make 100 limited pieces. Comes with a pair of pants as well, so it's a full outfit. But you don't have to wear it if you don't want to wear it. It's a collectible. It comes in a super nice box, and I want to create an experience. It's not gonna be overpriced. It's just like my way of giving back, to the metaverse, as well as to the galaxy that is universe, that is Star Wars. Sorry. So, and then yeah, honestly, wait for what's coming next. It's gonna be crazy. Like, the discussions. I wish I could
Yeah.
tell all here, but like, I just want my collectors to know that whatever comes next, it's gonna be just make everything else that happens before it more valuable. And also to my fans, right?
Mhm.
I've never been more inspired just making music, because I'm just in my studio making music for NFTs, and then like, oh wait, this is cool for my album. And all of these things, all of these radar, like all of these little connections start happening in my head again. It's like I've
Mhm.
just drank this, I took this pill, and I just like all of these wires in my brain started rewiring again. And I think I'm very close to finishing my album now, thanks to all of this, which my fans have been very cynical about. It's like
Yeah.
2 years late. I already did the tour before the pandemic. I did my sold out shows in New York, Paris, London, like Tokyo, um, and I just never released the album. But
Mhm.
who wants to release an album in a pandemic, right? So what happened is, in the end, it's going to be a better album than it was ever going to be. And I think this
Right.
is all thanks to NFT. And I would never forget where I came from. And I always pledge to put blood, sweat, and tears into everything I do, and never take anything for granted.
Yeah, I mean, like it's an incredibly inspirational to hear you sort of tell your story in the way that you do, right? Kind of like where you came from and kind of where you are now in the space of NFTs, right? And kind of how that's been like a born again experience for you. And by the way, I mean, that's incredibly innovative, the idea to sort of have like the hologram box, right, which sort of allows you to update sort of works of art that can be displayed on it. You know, I had thought like, oh, what if we had LED screens that could hang on our walls, and you could sort of buy from, or sort of you could collect from your favorite artists, and then you could sort of link a wallet up to the LED screen, and it would sort of display on your wall mount. But I mean, if you could actually have holographic images, right, that like you could load
Yeah,
up with new art, I mean,
but
that's so
exactly.
fucking cool.
I think also like it's because it makes like holograms makes thing that's the most futuristic thing that you can have, right? And it's never really
Right.
been in people's homes, and also like it makes it feel like a real object. Like you can really sort of almost like pick it up, you know, and that's what I really love about that.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's so like it's so cool. And you know, I'm sure that we're all gonna wait in anticipation for the next thing that you got going. Have you thought about doing something maybe in Decentraland, like doing virtual reality concerts or something like that? Has that crossed your mind at all?
Well, I mean, I've been, I think for everything that I do, that I put out that you see, whether it's a song or an NFT, I've created maybe at least five things that you haven't seen or maybe will never see, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things I've already done is once the pandemic hit, actually, I started working on a meta human version of myself and
Mhm.
creating a sort of my own meta universe. It's there. Again, I don't want to rush into things. I want it to be the best possible thing, right? So instead of me being in Decentraland, why don't I create my own, my own universe and have fans go in there? But again,
Right.
it goes back to the point where like I can be giving away things, but if they're not valuable or if they're not at the level of that I feel like they need to be at, then it's why would people value it, right? So that's at a process where I'm like creating, but it's literally just about like now just designing the clothes, literally like putting in the objects in all of the different spaces. Like that's literally how it goes. It's like literally like like uh, like like designing a house, right? Or like decorating a house, or it's like actual building. Um, and I think yeah, that's definitely going to be a part of my next moves. Um, and yeah, obviously the idea of like digital galleries and being able at the end of the day, to be like the reason why I do all of this is always been to support others. And the same with my music, like Hexagon is it's me, but it's also like hundreds and hundreds of kids around the world that are producing music that never put out music, and through me they get a chance to be released for the first time. We have conversations, I help them with the music, I push it as hard as I can for my platform, and also I have them retain 50% ownership, which is something I never had. When I was with a record label, I would get 15, 10%, or maybe even, if I'm really lucky, 20%. But here we go, like this is a partnership. We want to value you. And the funny thing is, not everyone even actually even realizes that yet. They will only realize it maybe 5 years from now when they go like, hey, wait, I actually have 50% of my own rights of something that I created. In that sense, Hexagon has always been unique in that way, where we've never been, sort of really money oriented. We always wanted to find ways to promote new talent and to help people. And that's kind of even with my last tour that I did for my last album. I said, well, I'm just going to spend my, you know, a lot of the money that I made on this album, I'll be spending on doing a free album tour. So you don't have to buy a ticket. You just go at the door. The only thing you have to do is you can donate if you want to the Cancer Trust, but I'll be paying for personnel, flights, hotels, equipment, rent, anything you can imagine. So you have to imagine this costs like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of euros, and with a lot of these things I'm doing in the background, that's how I want to give people equal opportunities. Like you don't have to be like even buying a ticket for one of my shows, whether it's like 30 euros is a lot of money for some people, right? They will never be able to see me live. this kind of allowed them to go to my concert for the first time and to see me in a very intimate way. And the one thing I did in that is that we kind of like kept track of like those who donated. Right, there was a minimum of €5 to donate to the Cancer Trust, because most people have €5, but this gives you a good feeling. You're donating to something that's very important in this world, and you're actually also getting something in return, right? But there were those who donated more than the obligated €5, and we had the records of that. And those people, we invited backstage. We had a chat. We took pictures. We hung out. We were friends, right? Later on, people were like, "Oh shit, yeah! If I would have known, I would have gone backstage. I would have got like a present, and like we got to hang out with Don Diablo. I would have paid a lot more." But that's what I tried to explain, even to my fans. Like, well, what I'm trying to show you guys, it's not really about what you do when people see it. It's really about what you do when nobody sees it, right? I think uh, that's also what's happening here in this space. For me, that kind of pissed me off. I saw some really hardcore fans that usually pay a lot of money to go to my show. Then when you tell them like you don't have to pay, just donate to this, very incredibly important charity. I lost almost like incredible amount of people to this disease. It will mean a lot if you can donate. And then nothing, like it's actually people didn't really have much money that donated a lot to this cause. And I think later on they were like pissed, like, oh yeah, again, like you should have told us, we would have donated a shitload of money. Again, so important. Do things that are good, that you don't have to take credits for everything. I think
Yeah.
this is what karma is, and this is really what this NFT space is about. It's really about giving back on the smallest of levels, and that's how we create an ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, well said. True character is revealed in what we do when not many people are looking. It's really exciting to see how the world of Hexagon is evolving, especially now with kind of the new things that you're doing. We're starting to run up on time here, so I
It's
want to
a
give you
long
one
interview, man.
last. Yeah, no, 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 and I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late for you, but
No,
I think it's been great.
I think I've never really spoken out like at this length about in this depth, especially with someone like yourself, who's like really versed in the subject. But this is something you can't really cut short, because there's so many ifs and buts. And if you really start a conversation about this, you really need to. It takes time. You really need to understand.
Right.
There's so many different layers to all of this. So yeah, I'm actually happy I got it out. Actually, I find interviews quite exhausting. Why? That's why I don't really do them often. Like,
Yeah.
um, but I felt like it was time for a good like video interview with an actual uh, platform like yourselves, like that
Yeah.
have people who understand the space and who are going to be you know um, hopefully understand a little bit more, or they already understand, but they there's
Yeah.
something that they can take away from this. And I look forward maybe to hearing reactions from it, or meeting people, or creating, again, it's creating a ripple effect with like-minded people. And if you're watching this right now, you're probably very like-minded because you would have never made it to the end otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, like, we are sort of really grateful that sort of you could be here with us. And kind of on that note, like maybe sort of some last closing words to any aspiring artists out there, or people who are just generally curious and kind of what's happening in this space here. What are some words of advice that you have to them? How could they learn more about this process? Sort of, what do you think are the most important things that they should keep in mind?
um, well, first of all, just read up on the internet. It's very simple. Go to NFT Bible, for instance. Read up about what is an NFT. Then kind of look up the different platforms. If you're an artist who wants to create, you're probably going to have to go to OpenSea first, because that's literally what it says. It's an OpenSea. Anyone can upload anything. If you go to like platforms like Foundation or Nifty or Super Rare, they're slightly more curated. Or when I say slightly, they're very curated. Don't feel disappointed when you don't get admitted, because they have long, long, long waiting lists. Um, but there are many, many other digital auction houses popping up right now. And I think also like you're gonna make mistakes. I made mistakes, even with minting. You feel like clumsy, you feel like a fool. You have no idea what you're doing, but that's okay. That's really part of the process. The biggest artists have done that. And also, I think don't be afraid to, um, it's like I speak to a lot of digital creators, mostly visual creators, right? Because that's the biggest space in this in the NFT creative, sort of corner of it. Um, and they're like, well, when you don't sell in the first day, week, month, you start to kind of start developing a light form of panic, right? Or like even anxiety. And I'm speaking to some incredibly talented artists that are actually experienced in this, and they have actually sold a few like really nice pieces for a very good amount, but then it goes down, it will go up, and there isn't really a constant. Again, there is no life hack. You might be uploading 4 pieces, nobody sees it. Maybe with the 5th piece, all of a sudden someone sees it. But it's exactly like doing art, making music, or anything like this. You have to be, you have to take this seriously. You have to put in the time, the craft. It's not like, again, I keep saying this, but it's not a life hack. You have to be patient, and I think also try to be as personal as possible. Put something in there that means something to you. Because if it's just something at random, like that just really is like really cool and technical, that is, well, actually that there are exceptions to that when it's really cool and really technical. But you can look that up, right? It's like look at other people's collections, look at some of like the collections that some of the bigger collectors have, and but usually I think what for me that works is like put in your personality, put in something that means something to you, because this is what a collector relates to. They want to read a little blurb, not just some vague Brad Pitt perfume commercial. You can't get away with that, right? It doesn't work. Like, somewhere in the metaverse, there's, into the oblivion of the beyondness. Yonder I go, where thou shalt be. Like, no. Try to, do something that has like relevance to your life or relevance to society, or would be appealing to someone emotionally. Um, Other than that, just make something really incredibly, like take your time, and it's not a race. There's no rush. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, I need to jump into this now because otherwise I'm too late. It's gonna stick around for a while, and quality will always prevail. So do not stress. And also just go on Clubhouse. If you don't have, I think it's available for Android soon already, maybe even if you don't have an iPhone. And just go into these groups, listen up, ask questions, and do not be afraid to ask questions.
Be yourself, experiment, slow and steady wins the race. Lastly, where can people find you? How can they keep up with sort of news on what you're doing? Where can they find your art? What's the plug?
At the moment, just follow me on my Twitter or my Instagram, um, which is they're both Don Diablo. At this point, my first pieces are on Super Rare. You go to superrare.co/Don Diablo. And the Star Wars drop, you can follow on my socials. There will be a bespoke landing page for this because it's a little bit more complicated. That's coming soon. Announcement or drop on the 4th of May, depending on when this is aired. So, yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to follow me. Or sometimes I put stuff up on YouTube as well, which is Don Diablo. It's all Don Diablo. So it's very easy. But in this space, obviously Twitter is very big. Made a big comeback. But yeah, for me it's Twitter and Instagram. All the information is there. So, or even dondiablo.com. Do you remember the website? You know where we were all like in the beginning, I need to have a great website. You're like, oh shit, well, what do I do? Put all the information there. So there's still that. There's still a website. Yes, it exists.
Beautiful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Don Diablo, the Renaissance man himself. My name is Tyler Olsson. You're tuned in to Reimagine 2021 version 8. Stay tuned.